Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza, your host here at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. I am so excited to bring you this guest today. His name is Craig. He's a hypnotherapist. I love that he does past life regressions. So much stuff. I'm fascinated by past life regressions. I don't know if you are, but if this is something that's sparkling your interest, then this is the episode for you. Welcome, Craig. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for coming to my podcast. How
Oh,
are you?
you're welcome, Valeria. I've been looking forward to this. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I don't mind talking about various subjects related to hypnotherapy or hypnosis or healing, but past life regression is really fun to talk about. So I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, I am so excited. So let's get started with where you were before you went down your own personal healing journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety myself, starting in the my teenage years, and so this is the 1980s. And back then, of course, there's no internet to research and grab information, and there's not even the medications, the Prozacs, the SSRI drugs. Those didn't come out till about the mid '90s or late '90s. And so, really, what you had was talk therapy or whatever book you could find at the bookstore or the library. And teenage boy is not going to do probably either of those. And so, I just kind of struggle with it. Tried to maintain a mask of everything's all right. And it just felt like this was the way it is. It's sort of like, how do you describe color to someone who's been blind since birth? How do you tell somebody who struggles with depression and anxiety that their people live with just peace and calm and joy? And so I just kind of struggle with it and live with it and hid it and wore it like a uncomfortable heavy coat with rocks in the pocket. And it was really the birth of my son in the year 2000 that I really kind of buckled down and said, I need to deal with this. My mother struggled with depression, suicidal thoughts, and I'm struggling with depression. And I thought, well, it's nature or nurture, and either way, my son's probability of him struggling with it is maybe probably pretty high. And so I thought maybe I figured it out myself on how to deal with it, understand it, uh, and manage it, or to even get rid of it. Then I could help him if he ever started struggling with it. So I really spent a good few years at the beginning of the 2000s really focusing on that issue. Kind of off and on with the challenges of life and raising a son and work and all that. But I just by then they had the internet and there was a lot of ways to research and find information that we didn't have in the 1980s.
Yeah, that's
And
that's
I just start,
really sorry,
yep,
that's really so interesting, right? Like, because I grew up in that time too, when there was really nothing that you can find, and it was so much more difficult to find a community to see that, oh, it's not just me, or there's others like me, and what have they done? And
yeah,
I find that anyone born in the 2000s can't even relate to that
yeah,
because they were born with the internet, right?
yeah. And now it's just so easy. Just go on Reddit or just find a Facebook group where you can discuss this and people can, well, this is what I did and try this or here's some advice. And you just didn't have that in the 80s and maybe a little bit in the 90s as the kind of early days of the internet was coming out.
I also
But
find that even today, with all of the resources and the ability to just do research online, that people who suffer with anxiety and depression, it's still really difficult for someone who doesn't to relate or
yeah,
to know what to do or how do I help you? Like, you're like, oh, I have a
yeah,
headache. Oh, here's some medicine. I have anxiety. Like,
yeah.
what, right? What do you tell somebody if you haven't experienced it, right?
Yeah. And you just say, well, snap out of it or
Yeah,
just get better. What's the problem?
yeah, there's no empathy.
Yeah, and I think they're relating their Monday morning blues or their TV show got canceled. And it's like, okay, well, I was sad for an hour or two, and then I got over it because I focused my attention on something else, and something else made me happy. And that's not what we're talking about. But again, like you say, if you haven't experienced it, you can't relate, and therefore, there is no empathy. Maybe there can be some compassion, but there can't be empathy. And and so what I just started working on myself and doing the exercises, the techniques, and learning the strategies to deal. And it was, a little bit later down the road when I woke up one morning and realized I hadn't felt depressed or anxious in a really long time. And I realized I had this toolbox filled with tools. And the kind of long story of it is I joined a writing contest. I started kind of this mastermind group. I highly recommend if anybody wants to create any sort of success, create a mastermind group. It doesn't even have to be people doing the same thing as you. It's just people looking for success so you can encourage each other and support each other and hold each other accountable. And there was this writing contest sponsored by Hay House, or I guess a subsidiary of Hay House called Hierophant back in 2010. And so I decided to enter a book about depression. I hadn't written a book, never written a book. And every month you had to submit a chapter. And I'm sure most of the people in the group are already written their book and were just submitting already written chapters. But I had to do the research and I had to write this thing and submit a so many word chapter by the end of the month. And, you start off with 200 people, and then the next month it's 100 people, and then the next month it's 50 people. And then, so over the course of a month, I got down to the top five. And though I didn't get the publishing contract, it was encouraging enough to think, oh, okay, well, maybe there's something here in this book and this information. So I just kind of started talking about it. That was the beginning days of podcasts, and of course, there's still radio interviews and things. And I was able to um have a chapter. I was offered to submit a chapter to a compilation book Hay House was doing called 30 Pearls of Wisdom with like Jack Canfield and other people. And so with that, I started helping the promotion with that. And that led to doing my own podcast called Tipping Point Radio, which I got to interview a whole bunch of wonderful people like Joe Dispenza and Marianne Williamson and Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton. And
Those are
I even
pretty impressive names.
yeah, and that was like 2012. That was a kind of still kind of somewhat the early days of podcasting,
Hmm.
and there wasn't the kind of competition there is nowadays with all the celebrities having their own podcast, and so they're more willing to, oh, here's an opportunity to, talk about what I want to talk about. And I even got to interview John McLaughlin, the jazz guitarist. We talked about spirituality and music, and it was just really cool podcast. But it got to a point where I had the opportunity to train as a hypnotherapist. And it really excited me because hypnotherapy was one of the things that helped me in dealing with some of the hurt and pain I was dealing with growing up.
So
And
wait a
so,
second. I'm sorry.
mhm.
Um, so can you go back a little and tell us some of the tools? Because you said I found myself that I had this bag of tools that I had used, and one day I woke up and I didn't have these feelings anymore. So can you
Yeah, yeah.
share maybe some of those tools that you had?
Sure, absolutely. There's lots of different things, and there could be a whole series of class. In fact, I put together a course on test anxiety using a lot of these tools. And but yeah, I'll share one with you right now. Of course, I was doing lots of different things, everything from diet, nutrition, exercise. There's hundreds upon hundreds of research papers, studies published in peer-reviewed journals of medical journals, scientific journals, showing that exercise will cure chronic depression as well as medication, if not better than medication. And not just again the Monday morning blues or your TV show got canceled kind of sadness. It's chronic depression can be helped with exercise. So it's all these different things. You got to watch your alcohol intake, you got to watch your coffee intake, all these kind of things about nutrition, about supplements, about exercise, but also mindset exercise. Of course, hypnotherapy was helping me with some of the deeper issues. But one quick exercise I want to show everybody, and you can follow on, of course, if you're driving while listening to this, kind of clock where we are in the interview and come back to this, or if you're, supervising the kids around the swimming pool or cooking with fire or whatever. If you can focus on this exercise, do it. If you're focusing or concentrating on something else, do that and come back to it. But it's a really simple exercise called 3-2-1 reset, developed by Dr. Richard Nongard, a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist. And what it does is within about 5 minutes, it will reset your nervous system and literally change the chemistry in the brain. And really quickly, the three stands for three slow, gentle, deep breaths into your abdomen. This is going to get air into the bottom of your lungs. If you kind of have the opportunity to feel where your rib cage ends, it's about 2 inches from your hip bones. Your lungs are huge. But when you're stressed, you just have a tendency to breathe into the top part of that narrow part of the lungs. You're not utilizing the fullness of your lungs. And so by breathing into your abdomen, you flatten out your diaphragm, you get air into the bottom of your lungs, really fill up those lungs because 20% of the oxygen you breathe in goes directly to your brain. And that's going to fuel your brain. It's going to nurture your brain. All that oxygen is going to allow you to think in a calm, rational manner. And so when we're stressed, we have a tendency to tighten our stomach muscles. The rib cage is for the heart and the lungs. The only thing protecting the vital organs of the abdomen are the muscles. And so you tighten your muscles, waiting for that 1-2 punch to the gut, even though maybe you're taking a test or there's a meeting at work or there's a family situation, but you're going to tighten those and therefore you can't get a deep breath. So one great breathing exercise, just as a mindfulness exercise, again, only if it's safe for you to do so, but at some point, maybe just lie down on the floor, maybe on a yoga mat or something, and just concentrate mindfully on breathing into your abdomen. If you haven't done it for a while, it actually is a little tricky because you got to release all those muscles. And so the first part of this 3-2-1 reset exercise, breathing deeply. The other real big aspect of this is we have all these nerves that come out of the back of our head. There's that thing when you touch a hot pot, a signal goes from your hand up to your brain, says you're touching a hot pot, let it go. A signal goes back down to your hand, you let it go. The 10th cranial nerve is the vagus nerve. And vagus is Latin for wander because this vagus nerve attaches to the eyes and to the ears and to the muscles of your jaw, goes past your vocal cords, attaches to your heart, to your lungs, and to your gut. And the vagus nerve is a big part of the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the relaxation response. There's the sympathetic stress response, fight or flight stress response. The parasympathetic relaxation response. That's where we're supposed to be most of the time when we're all the systems of our body getting the right amount of blood supply and oxygen and nutrients and fuel to run at optimum levels. And so the vagus nerve is a big part of that relaxation response, parasympathetic nervous system. It's attached to the lungs. By breathing slowly, easily, gently, and deeply, you stimulate the vagus nerve and therefore activate the parasympathetic relaxation response. Really simple. And that's why breath work, whether you're literally doing that healing modality of breath work or just doing pranayama exercises in yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong or martial arts, the breath is very important to all those modalities because it can really reset your nervous system and center you. So big part of this is the breath. The two is we're going to create bilateral stimulation because when you're feeling stressed or panic or anxious, you're lighting up a part of the right side of the brain. And to light up this part of the right side of the brain, to light up all the neurons right there, to fuel that stress response and that panic and that fear, it needs blood supply, it needs oxygen, it needs nutrients. So it's going to vacuum it away from all these other parts of the brain. These other parts of the brain go quiet. And so how do you undo that? Well, there's bilateral stimulation exercise. And here's my little stress ball, squeezy ball. And right side of the brain controlling the left side of the body, left side of the brain controlling the right side of the body. So even if you just do an exercise like I have my arms outstretched for the listeners, kind of in a T shape, a cross shape, outstretched, and now I'm going to pass the ball right in front of me, and I'm just going to do this. And by forcing my body to do this, I have to light up my brain. I have to fire neurons to do this exercise. And it needs fuel, it needs nutrients. So it's going to vacuum it away from that panic and anxiety. So that your feeling state of anxiousness goes down. If you've ever been back you remember back in school or you've been at a meeting and you saw somebody drumming on their knees, patting their knees really quickly, they're nervous, they're anxious, they're trying to calm themselves down. They're not hyper or ADHD. They're nervous and they're trying to calm themselves down because that's bilateral stimulation. Walking down the street, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, that's bilateral stimulation. So what we're going to do while breathing slowly and deeply, we're going to grab our shoulders, make this X right around your chest. And you can squeeze your shoulders, but you'll obviously notice that this is a hug. And this hug is sending a signal from the nerves in your body and the cells, sending it back up to your brain. This is nurturing, loving, healing touch. And you are now creating oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine in your brain, even though you're giving yourself the hug. And if you want to just kind of squeeze your shoulders or give yourself a bear hug or do the havening technique, or at least this part of the havening technique where you're rubbing your hands up and down your arms, it feels good. Whatever you want to do, whatever feels best. Because if you're feeling good, that means you're changing your brain chemistry. You're turning off that adrenaline and cortisol, those stress hormones, and you're turning on the feel-good hormones of oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. And now we're going to supersize this by thinking of somebody we want to give a hug to. The mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. That's why a nightmare feels so scary. Even though it may be super ridiculous, like a cheeseburger's chasing down the street throwing coconuts at you. It's dumb. It's never going to happen. But your mind can't tell the difference and has this shoot first, ask questions later safety protocol. So I'll turn on the stress response even in deep sleep. And so we're going to use that to our advantage and do it on purpose. And so with this hug, and if it's safe for you and you can do this exercise right now, closing your eyes, and think of somebody you want to give a hug to. And it could be a good friend in your life, it could be a child, it could be a pet, it could be your dog, a cat. It could be somebody who maybe is no longer with us, your grandmother, your grandfather. It could be somebody you've never met before, maybe Mother Teresa or Gandhi or Joan of Arc or somebody who inspires you. Again, the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So by lighting up the visual part of the brain, thinking of somebody you care for and love, on top of this hug, you're adding in not only visual and imaginative, but a kinesthetic physical response. And you're literally have not only reset your nervous system, turned off the stress response, turned on the relaxation response, the parasympathetic. You're now creating oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, and the molecules and neuropeptides of love, joy, and happiness. And you do this all within 5 minutes. And that's just one exercise. And maybe we could do another one at the end. That's that'll help reset your nervous system. And the body and mind have this protocol in terms of learning. What you do the most is what you get better at. What you practice, you get better at. We know this from playing piano or guitar, or riding a bicycle, or learning to walk when you're a little kid, or tying your shoes, or whatever it is, martial arts, dance. What you practice the most, you get better at. But what if you're practicing depression? What if you're practicing anxiety? What if you're practicing anger? You're just going to get better at that. So there's a certain relentlessness to this work, not only just the work of feeling calm and peaceful, but of course the spiritual work too. There's a certain relentlessness to it and a constant practice. Even the Dalai Lama still meditates every day. The guy's 89 years old, probably 90 years old at this point. And the guy's been meditating probably for 80 years, 85 years. And he's still meditating because he knows what is strongest within his mind is what he practices. And you read his books, he talks about the anger and the sorrow and despair of what's going on in Tibet, let alone the rest of the world. And Chinese government, excuse me, Chinese government is still bulldozing down his monasteries to build roads and buildings, and mainly probably to give him the middle finger. Guy was exiled out of Tibet in 1957, 1956, something like that. And so there's anger there, there's sorrow there. But he doesn't want that to be who he is. So every day he practices loving kindness and compassion meditation. And he's not married. He doesn't have any kids. He doesn't have a lot of the challenges most of us, here on this podcast listening and have to deal with. And he's still doing the practice. And so there's a certain relentlessness to this work. You can have all the happiness and joy and peace that you want, but there's a practice to it. And that's a great exercise to do it, watching what you eat, exercising, getting out into the sunshine. These are all little things, I guess. I don't want to call them little, but because they're so important, I guess maybe easy things to do. 5 minutes to do 3-2-1 reset, or maybe a similar kind of exercise. If you don't have an hour to meditate, what if you could do a simple little exercise like 3-2-1 reset, or maybe you have something in your own toolbox you can do, and just practice and practice and practice. And that's what got me to my place, that relentlessness of practicing, plus doing the deeper work. And for me, what I chose to do was hypnotherapy because in a lot of the self-help books, a lot of the personal development books, uh, they would always have their top 10 things to do or top 5 things to do or the bullet points on what you can do to change your life. And they'd mostly all be different except one. They'd always mention hypnotherapy. Every single list back in the day mentioned hypnotherapy as something you could do to really change your life around. So I tried it, and what's extraordinary about it is I'm not here to fix anybody. A hypnotherapist isn't fixing anybody. Hypnotherapy in and of itself is not fixing anybody. You're going to fix yourself. And that's the difference between therapeutic hypnosis and maybe like talk therapy, counseling, which can be very helpful and useful, but you're using the power of your subconscious mind to create change, which is where the hurt and the pain is being held on to. And so I found so much healing in my life. I got the opportunity to train as a hypnotherapist, and I just kind of had to park some other things in my life, like the podcast and books and things like that, to just kind of focus on this. And ever since I've been helping people, but it's a joyful way to be out in the world. And one of the more interesting and fascinating and fun aspects of it is the more spiritual side of it. And so I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but that's kind of I guess, a too long explanation of where I got here. But little
No, it's
exercise,
wonderful. It's wonderful.
even if you just have 5 minutes, because a lot of people think, well, maybe I'll have an hour after work, or maybe I'll have an hour and a half on Saturday or something. 5 minutes. If you just have 5 minutes, here's what you can do, and use it to your advantage.
I love that. It feels like there's so many tools, right? That you just gave us, a few here, and they're so simple and so accessible to everybody. And it feels like this is how I feel with my own spiritual awareness is that it can't work if it's that
Yeah.
simple. It's
Yeah.
not gonna do anything if anything if it's just 5 minutes. And it's just that thought in our head that
Mhm.
just stops us from even trying it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that happens with the healing work too. I have a great story about that real quick
Yeah.
in terms of just people's understanding of how healing happens and their own interpretation of it because of what they were taught. And change happens in an instant. There may be some lead up to it or some setup to that change, but change happens in an instant, just as instantaneously as someone may install trauma or fear or anger or anxiety into their lives because of an experience, traumatic experience, just as instantaneously as that can happen. Why couldn't it be healed instantaneously? And you start saying, well, who told you that it couldn't be? And what is it to their advantage that you don't heal it quickly? And so change in terms of what I've seen in the world and what I've studied, change happens in an instant. Again, there may be some setup, there may be some lead up to that change, but change happens in an instant. I was working with somebody who was he's retired, but he was a counselor, marriage family counselor, therapist, had his master's degree in counseling. He's dealing with some uh, kind of illness, and he had a kind of his team he was working with because he had not only was he dealing with a physical illness, but he was dealing with a lot of complex sorry, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So PTSD over a long period of time through his childhood, and he just wanted to deal with it. He's heading into his 70s, and he wanted to deal with this. And so he's working with a lot of different people. He's working with a thought field therapist, which is kind of that tapping, the EFT, but with more of a psychotherapeutic aspect to it. He's working with a talk therapist. Of course, he had his doctors he's working with the physical thing. And he decided, oh, I'm going to do hypnotherapy as well. And I was working with people, and generally I work with people maybe 3, 4 times. That's it. Again, this isn't talk therapy, what we're doing. It's very, very different. And I kept working with him like week after week and say, yeah, I want to do another session. I want to do another session. But we kind of kept doing the same stuff and he didn't want to do the deeper work. Uh, and literally after about like 6 months, which is, I've never done that before. I usually see people over the course of maybe a month and that's it. we've been doing like 7, 8 months, and I was starting to feel so my confidence started to lag. And I was just like, well, maybe what I do doesn't work, and he didn't seem to be getting better. And so I thought this was creating kind of a codependent relationship, and I was just feeling really odd to me. So we actually had a conversation outside of a session on the phone, and I was just explaining to him because I figured he'd understand being a counselor himself, a therapist himself. And so we had this discussion, and he at one point said, well, I know that it's going to take me years, if not decades, to heal. And that goes against my model of healing because I think it's going to take weeks, if not days, if not hours, to heal. And so we had two different models of healing that were butting heads with each other. If the work I do with people in 3 or 4 sessions, if if that healing work to him, that was going to take 10 years. If we got it all done within 12 years, he would have been happy. And to me, I was feeling off about the whole thing because I'm like, wow, we're still doing this 6 months, 7 months later, and nothing seems to be getting better because we had two different models of healing. And he's the one that's doing the healing. So, of course, his model is going to win out. I can't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. If your intention is to heal over the course of a decade, what are the chances is it going to take you 10 years to heal? If your intention is to heal in a session or 2 or 3, you know, if your intention is to change in an instant, what are the chances that you're going to do that? And so it's really about your intention on how you want to do this work. Again, I can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. That's why smoking cessation isn't 100% guarantee. If I could make people do what I do, I could go into prisons and make everybody be upstanding citizens and law-abiding citizens. I'd go to the leaders of the world and create world peace. I'd be able to get Elon Musk to write me a $1 billion check. But I don't have a $1 billion check because I can't make people do anything they don't want to do. And so if you want healing, you can have it. If you want joy, you want happiness, you want to deal with that trauma maybe you were experiencing as a child even, you're allowed to do that. You have the right, you have the power, you have the ability to do that. It's your intention to heal, you can have healing. If it's your intention to hold on to it for a decade and spin it around and talk about it, then that's probably what you're going to do.
This
You
is
know?
so eye-opening, right? Because we do bring in the healing, our preconception of what it should be or how long it should take.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if you're giving permission to your clients to like, okay, this might take, it could be today or it could be by the end of the
Yeah.
month. And it's like, what? Like I can
Yeah.
actually have results. That's amazing. It's a great way of shifting the perspective of what is actually possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we're remarkable people. And what we're really focusing on is the placebo effect. And we know about the placebo effect because every research study that's published in a peer-reviewed scientific or medical journal has to have that placebo, has to have the control group. And especially if you're researching medication. Let's say somebody, pharmaceutical companies doing uh, high blood pressure medication. Now they're going to have a control group that gets the sugar pill. Why? Because they know mind will heal the body and they have to account for that. And so let's say they get 100 people into this high blood pressure medication study, 50 of those people are going to get a sugar pill. And let's say 30% of those people get better. They literally reduce their blood pressure or whatever the situation is that they're researching. They healed themselves through mind, through thought alone. They healed the body. They changed the body. Let's say the people who are getting the real medication, the high blood pressure medication, 40% get better. Well, the researchers now have to subtract 30% because what if those people got better through mind as well? Not the medication, but through mind. So really only 10% got better, and that's good enough, and we'll put it on the market at $50 a pill. But nobody looks at, yeah, but more people got better statistically through mind. But there's no big money in teaching people how to use your mind for healing. Um,
It's all changing now.
yeah, well, it's changing now, but you can't patent somebody's subconscious mind. You can't
Mhm.
copyright or trademark somebody's mind. So there's not hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. There is in that high blood pressure medication, but there's not in just teaching people. Yeah, you can make a nice living and it's a joyful way to make a living, but you're not going to make the huge money in teaching people how to use mind. I mean, you have people like Joe Dispenza now doing it and others like him. But he's actually going out there and showing people in his workshops and in his books and in his lectures and things, this is how you do it. And he's been doing that for 20 years, and he's very successful. Uh, but again, he's not making the billions and billions of dollars that a pharmaceutical company wants to make. So it's, it's possible and it is happening. And because of people like Joe Dispenza and others, doing the same kind of work, it's getting out there, definitely.
Yeah,
But
this is one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast as well, bringing
yeah,
all kinds of different practitioners with different holistic modalities, because really the power is within us, and just allowing more and more people to see that light, to get that empowerment, and eventually leave. I mean, if most people are able to tune into whatever type of holistic medicine
right.
resonates with them,
Yeah,
um, then pharmaceutical businesses will go away because I mean, most people will be doing their own healing,
yeah, yeah,
sharing what they know.
yeah. And we know that it can happen. We know mind will heal the body. It's the placebo effect. And so a lot of therapeutic hypnosis is tapping into that, knowing that the subconscious with the right suggestions, the right instructions, and the right intention from the person wanting the healing can heal in that way, whether it's a physical healing or there's emotional issues going on, mental issues, mindset issues, beliefs, limiting beliefs. You're allowed to heal, and if you have the intention of wanting to get better, because again, if somebody comes to me to quit smoking and they don't want to quit, they just want to negotiate with their spouse to smoke in the garage instead of the house, they're not going to quit smoking because they don't want to. You know, can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. And then people say, "Oh, what about those shows you see in Las Vegas or the comedy clubs or whatever?" It's like, well, every single one of those people up on that stage doing the silly stuff volunteered to be up there. And they were actually kind of tested. If you really watch those shows and look at what the hypnotist is doing, they have to go through several levels of to even get up on the stage. Like they'll do a big process with everybody and who felt they went really deep, and they'll get up on stage and it'll be maybe about 12 people, and they'll do a process of like, okay, now I want you all to pretend that your hands are glued together. They're glued together, super glue, and you can't pull them apart. Try to pull your hands apart, and somebody will do this. They're off the stage because they're not going to be a good candidate for the entertainment side of it. That's what, people paid good money to be entertained, to have a good laugh. People up there are exhibitionists, they're extroverts, they want a funny video to put on, Instagram or TikTok or wherever. They want to have fun with their friends and be silly. And so that's their intention. And so that's why they get up there and they sing like Elvis Presley, they dance like Michael Jackson, they do all the silly stuff, is because they want to. The hypnotist isn't making them do anything they don't want to do. And there's all these kind of tests to get them up onto the stage. And by the time the actual show starts, there's probably only like 6 or 7 people up there because other people have been, okay, well, I don't think you're a good candidate, or they're nervous because they got stage fright. They didn't think it through, and now they're nervous, under the lights and the cameras and the audience. And so they're getting nervous and they're like, oh, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And they go back to their seat, but everybody else has a really good time. So you can't make anybody do anything that's against their intention or their morality. I can't, if someone comes to me to quit smoking and wants to quit smoking, they're going to quit smoking. But I can't offer in suggestions to go rob a bank and now let's split the loot, unless they're a bank robber, and then they're going to do it. But if
Uh-huh.
more than likely, they're not going to follow the suggestion to rob a bank, you know.
I love that you explained that, because it also feels like some people might be weary of, like, I don't really want to do this hypnosis thing because I want to be in charge, or I want to know what I'm doing. And
Well, and that's
so
the thing. You will actually know what you're doing.
mhm.
You are in charge. This is about not this therapeutic hypnosis is not about taking away control. It's about giving you the control back. And you'll absolutely know what you're doing. It's not like putting somebody in a big coma-like state and then, doing all suggestions and instruction. It's about there's actual engagement. Tell me where you feel that anxiety, point to it, and all these different kind of techniques. But the person's conscious enough to actually have a conversation with me because that's how the healing is going to happen. That's how it's going to get directed. But in a sense, people are already hypnotized. If you're reacting to a trigger in your environment, in your world during your day, and creating massive amounts of anxiety or anger or fear, you're already hypnotized, especially if the threat is just imaginary. I know people who are the calmest, most wonderful, peaceful, pacifistic, if that's a word, people I've ever met. And you get them behind the wheel of a car on a freeway, and just the rage comes out, and the screaming, and the curse words, and the gripping of the steering wheel. What are these people doing? And it's like, where did that come from? It's like they've hypnotized themselves to when a certain situation comes in by being in a car in the driver's seat on the freeway with a bunch of, yeah, okay, I get it, idiots on the freeway, that this is how I need to react with anger, with rage. They have hypnotized themselves because it's coming automatically. If people hypnotize themselves maybe to be anxious before a test they have to take, whether it's SAT in high school or a college test or taking the bar exam as a lawyer, or you're an electrician or plumber, or real estate agent, or or auto mechanic that has to take a licensing exam, massage therapist take a licensing exam, and you get nervous before the test. You know the material backwards and forwards, and yet you're creating this physical response. You've hypnotized yourself to
How
create a
do we
physical
do
response
that
to a
without
certain.
knowing? Like
Um,
how are we doing this? And you also what you're saying goes back to like it feels like it's a program that we create when we're younger, as in school,
yeah.
and then you carry that over because I used to be a former teacher, and I do remember when the supervisor would come to observe, a lot of my colleagues would be like, "Oh, I'm getting observed today," and they would be nervous the whole day, and I would be like, "Why? Like, like
Well,
you did
a
the
lot of
same
it,
thing whether they're here
yeah.
or not."
In terms of working with people with that issue, a lot of it comes down to fear of failure and fear of judgment.
Mm.
And the reason why that probably was installed as an instruction that they carry into their adult life and their career or their business, their job, is because somewhere down the line there was a traumatic experience around it. And I don't mean maybe there's physical abuse or even emotional abuse. It was just that maybe they got a D- on the math test and they got punished for it. They didn't get to go to the homecoming dance, or they had to repeat math class in summer school. Instead of the test being like, oh my God, you really don't know your times tables, or you don't know algebra or whatever. Instead, it's like, okay, well, now we need to do some more work about that. It's like you failed, and therefore there will be consequences in the form of some sort of punishment. And so the fear of failure and being punished, or fear of being judged and being punished, or my God, musicians and actors going out for auditions, and you walk into a room, like if you're an actor and you're doing a movie or something, and everybody looks like you, and everybody's saying the lines the same way as you, the fear of judgment or not doing well and not getting the role, or auditioning as a musician and not getting into the band or the orchestra or whatever. Even a job interview. They may be looking at 10 people for one job. There's a good chance you're not getting it, but it's that fear of like, I really want this job and they're going to judge me and maybe I'm not good enough. And yeah, that may have started as children. 0 to 7 is when a lot of that imprinting happens, right? As the mind is forming, and really our brains aren't truly formed until I think in women, it's females are 22 to 23, and males are 24 to 25 or something when before the brain is even fully formed, and let alone getting that critical faculty, that kind of filter, that guard wall between what is real and what is imagined. Because little kids, everything's, you love Santa Claus and you love the Easter Bunny, and it's all real. It doesn't make any sense. Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or any of the other kind of fairy tales or
Wait a
that's
second, wait a
real.
second. No, just stop right there. What?
Yeah,
No,
well,
no, no, no.
yeah.
Santa Claus is real.
I actually probably shouldn't have said that because you might have kids in the car.
Yeah.
Maybe you can beep that out or edit that out. But kids like 0 to 7. Now I feel really bad about that. I hope there weren't kids around when I was saying that. They're probably not listening anyway. But
What are you
uh
talking about?
yeah,
Santa
right.
Claus
Yeah, I'm just
exists.
joking.
Like,
I'm really just joking about
a
it.
little
But
delusion in there for a little bit.
0 to 7 is when kids just can't really tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined or what's pretend. And that's why it's so fun to watch them play, because to them it is real and they really do have invisible friends, you know. And so uh, a lot of imprinting, as a lot of that nurture, as opposed to nature, happens 0 to 7. The Jesuits have a that kind of offshoot of the Catholics. The Jesuits have a saying that give me the boy to the age of 7 and I'll give you the man, because they know they can train a child up to the age of 7 and then you'll get the person you want them to be. And so maybe somewhere around there, maybe you weren't as nurtured as and protected and felt as safe as maybe you should have been when you were a child, and that can be carried on into the later on in years, especially as a teenager, when you're feeling awkward about yourself and you're not very self-assured and maybe your self-esteem isn't very high, and then you start getting bad grades and you start getting stressed and you're not sleeping. It just kind of snowballs itself. And so, in terms of a lot of this stuff, in terms of like the car, who knows? Maybe they're just mirroring what dad did when he drove, just mumbling and cursing and telling everybody they're an idiot as they drive down the road. And so they're just mirroring that, or maybe they just had a really bad day once, or they have a long commute and it's frustrating to them. Again, what you practice, what you do over and over again, you get better at. What you practice, you get better at. What is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. And if you get irritated in the car once, and then twice, and then 3 times, and then your long commute is always these, rush hour traffic, you're practicing just being irritated. And so you're signaling your body to be irritated while sitting in this car with your hands on the steering wheel, your foot on the accelerator or the brake, sitting in this specific kind of seat, which is different than a recliner at home, which is different than your desk chair at work. And it just signals that this is the time to be irritable. Sort of like in high school, if you ever had that um, class maybe you didn't like, and you didn't like the teacher, and the teacher didn't like you, and it was just painful to be in that class. You're going to associate that specific room how the maps were hung on the wall, where the bookshelf was, the globe on the desk, the way the desks were situated in the classroom. You walk in that room, you're going to feel a certain way. Maybe on the other side of the building is a class you really loved. You loved the teacher loved you, and the classroom set up differently. That room's going to have a different feeling state. It's just walls, it's just drywall and 2x4s and paint and maps on walls and pictures and desks and chairs, but it feels different. And if you went back to your 10-year high school reunion and the rooms looked the same, you'd be able to walk into that one room and like get a feeling state from that space. Walk down to the other room, you get a feeling state. That's why a Starbucks feels a certain way. It's different than another coffee shop because they set it up to feel a certain way. A church feels a certain way, especially like a cathedral that you may see in Europe that's hundreds and hundreds of years old. It feels a certain way. That's different than somebody's home or a modern hotel. And so you can have spatial anchors to get you to feel a certain way. And that could be a car. And if you're practicing being irritated and angry in the car, it's just going to get easier and easier to be angry in the car. or if you're practicing being nervous before a test, and that started out in high school or even before that, elementary school. And yeah, guess what? You now have to take a licensing or some sort of certification exam, and you're nervous. Why? You know the material,
So, how
but
do you use hypnosis to release that fear or to heal from that anxiety that we may have programmed ourselves, knowing or unknowing,
yeah.
since childhood?
A lot of it is starting with the feeling state in the body because to feel that anxiety, there's anxiety has a different feeling, or how is it? People can differentiate between anger and anxiety and sadness and worry and overwhelm and all these different definitions of feeling states. You can differentiate between them because of the way the chemistry is changing in your brain. We create neuropeptides, these molecules, and hundreds of millions. Like, let's say you're driving down the street and driving down the road and you get angry. Well, now your brain's starting to create adrenaline and cortisol and these neuropeptides of anger because it wants to send the signal of anger to the cells of your body, to the muscles, to the tissues of your organs. Hundreds of millions of these molecules. And these are literal molecules of anger, molecules of fear, molecules of anxiety, molecules of joy, molecules of happiness, molecules of love. And so we start with the feeling state. And where do you feel that in your body? Because your subconscious mind is going to show you where that hurt and pain resides. It originates in somewhere in your body, and you hold on to it somewhere in your body. Maybe some people in their chest or their heart, or some people in their throat, or the back of the neck, or their head, or their gut, maybe even their arms or their fists. And we're going to start creating a symbolism and metaphor around this feeling because your subconscious mind speaks in metaphor and symbolism and storytelling. It's not the logical mind. Conscious mind is the logical mind, the analytical mind. So we're going to use storytelling and symbolism to access the subconscious. So what color is that anxiety? What does it look like? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it big? Is it small? 0 to 10. How do you feel right now about this thing? Or what's the level of anxiety? 0 to 10. Zero being most peaceful, 10 being the most anxious you've ever felt. Maybe it's a 2. Maybe it's an 8. Maybe it's a 9. Maybe it's an 11. And so what this is doing is accessing different parts of your brain to light up. And you're disassociating yourself from that pain, that hurt, and that anxiety by asking these questions and visualizing, well, it's like a black heaviness. It's almost like a gunk, or it's a spiky red ball or something. And now what we're going to do is pull it out. The mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imaginal. Change your physiology to match what you're thinking and feeling, just like um, that nightmare example I used. And so we're going to do it to your advantage. We're going to access this and use this to your advantage. And so just pull it out. And you pull and you pull and you pull and you pull. And uh, generally, the first sessions I do with people are about 90 minutes. And it may seem like a long time, especially when like talk therapy is 50 minutes. I do 90-minute sessions, at least the first one or two, because I want to make sure there's enough healing. I was literally yesterday working with somebody, 77-year-old woman who's had chronic anxiety since she was 19. And she felt it in her head. It was red energy in her head. I said, I just want you to start pulling it out. 48 minutes she pulled. 48 minutes she just pulled and pulled and pulled.
Wow.
And it's extraordinary. Uh, you know, usually it's about 5, 10 minutes. Like you're getting to 10 minutes, it's like, wow, that was a lot of stuff. But there's been a handful of people like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then yesterday, 48 minutes. And you understand, it's like if you've been holding on to that, there's a lot. And yes, it's a hypnosis is about imagination and pretend, playing pretend.
So
And
essentially, like when you were a child playing with your
exactly,
imaginary friend.
and you think it's real. But
Hmm.
that's the beauty of this is that your subconscious mind thinks it's real. It's giving you the symbolism, the metaphor of a red spiky ball or black gunk or a heavy dark blue or whatever it is giving you, and it's giving you that because it's time to remove it. What needs to be removed? This anxiety. Okay, we've defined it. And that may mean different things to different people. or the anger or the hurt or the pain or the tension or the pressure? Where is it? What does it look like? Your subconscious mind is showing you what needs to be removed. So remove it. And then we're going to change it. Now that all that black gunk or that red spiky balls, somebody had ping pong balls, was pulling out ping pong balls. Um, there's all sorts of different things where you're going to do with it, but basically, like put it within a black frame. And so all that energy is encased with a black frame. You know how big it is. Sort of like it's all in a big black box. And now you're going to do some other stuff, but basically you're going to squish that black frame and all the stuff inside of it into your fist. And now you're going to throw it behind you. Because if it's behind you, it's not there anymore. You're going to throw it to the end of the ever expanding universe. And are you literally doing that? Okay, probably not. Maybe you are if you're really in tune to energy. But the metaphor is that you have put it behind you. You have changed it, and therefore you are in control. You have been given back control on how to deal with this. Now, there may be other deeper issues to work on, but that's a lot of the first part of the session is that cleansing and cleaning and letting go work, the taking off of the heavy overcoat. Drop it. You feel so much lighter. It can be ecstatic. Some people just like want to go out and dance the night away. Other people just want to go a long walk in the sunshine. Other people want to take a 12-hour nap. This can be exhausting to do that work, to pull out your hurt and pain for 48 minutes, you know. And so, but change happens in an instant. Yeah, there was some lead up to that, and maybe it took 48 minutes to create change in an instant. But once she pulled and pulled, and finally she just looked up with her eyes open. She just said, "It's done. It's all out."
She knew.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And then
And
after that, it
well, it's
lasts
just yesterday, but
permanent.
here's something. Here's another quick story.
Hmm.
I was working with somebody. I was back in 2020 and 2021. I was doing classes for the cancer support community of Arizona. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, up in the mountains, up in northern Arizona, and uh, everything had gone to Zoom at that point. And so we're doing Zoom classes and doing a series of classes on pain control and healing acceleration and immune system boosting using hypnotherapy. And in one series of these classes, there's a woman, I'm guessing she's about 70 years old, and uh, she came to the first two classes. These are group classes, 12, 15 people in a class. And on the third class, she was early, and of course, I'm there setting up the Zoom room and all that stuff. So we're just chit-chatting, and she asked me if hypnotherapy works with procrastination. And yeah, it works with procrastination. Uh, that's a mindset issue. You're moving away from something that could be beneficial to you. And fear and anxiety is actually good. You don't want to get rid of it. That's what keeps you from walking down the dark alley at midnight, even though it's a shortcut home. No, keep to the lighted streets, keep to the busy streets. Here in southern Arizona, you're out in the desert, you're walking out in nature, and there's a rattlesnake in the trail. Move away from the rattlesnake. It's not your friend. And so they're fighting the street. You want to move away. So it's a mindset issue that something seems dangerous about this thing that could be beneficial to you in work or relationships or whatever. So you procrastinate, you don't do it, you move away from it. So it's a mindset issue. And that can be helped in hypnotherapy. And I had an appointment the very next day in the afternoon available. So she signs up for the appointment the next day, and it's a Zoom session. Probably 80% of my sessions are over Zoom nowadays. And she shows up and what's interesting about this work is once you realize you're going to be doing some healing work, the gears start turning in the mind, and you start thinking, well, you could work on a problem, but why not work on the problem? And when she got to the session, she says, I know I told you I wanted to work on procrastination, but what I really want to work on is why I don't matter in life. There's a
Oh,
70-year-old woman who thinks she doesn't matter, who thinks she's worthless. So yeah, we can work on that, certainly. There's a feeling state to that in the body. And so we start the process, this healing work, and we get to a point where it's like, I want you to tell me where you feel that you don't matter. That originates somewhere in the body. Where do you feel it? Point to it. What does it look like? And now, because of this, we needed to heal the origin of that. Let's go back to the first time you ever felt that you weren't worthy, that you didn't matter. I'm going to count 10 down to one. On one, you'll be at the very first time you never felt that you never mattered in life, that you were worthless. And so 10 down to one and one, I ask her, and now where are you? She says, I'm standing up in my crib and my father's screaming at me because I won't stop crying. And so I don't know, standing up in your crib is like 12 months old, 14 months old. And if she's 70-ish years old, that's the late 1950s, early 1960s. And yeah, dads maybe back then weren't exactly taught how to be nurturing parents to children. And or maybe wasn't the greatest dad in the world, or maybe he's having a bad day, a bad week, a bad life. Mom's out of the house, the baby won't stop crying, he doesn't know what to do. And so he just screams louder than the baby and tells the baby to shut up. And in that instant, the child needs to justify why this is happening. Why is this happening to me? This person who's supposed to protect me and nurture me and love me is screaming at me. It's terrifying. Why is this happening to me? Well, I guess it's because I don't matter. I guess it's because I'm worthless. Now, is that true? Of course, it's not true. But that's the instruction that was installed, the suggestion, in order to justify why this trauma was happening. And she held on to that for some 70 years until one day she decided to change. And she did. I never saw her again.
Wow,
And we
so powerful.
check in with each other over the course of the months and over the course of a year, and she's doing great. Just emails, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing all right? So yeah, I'm doing great, doing fantastic. Change happens in an instant. And she did 2 group sessions over Zoom that had nothing to do with the issue she wanted to work on, did 1 solo session. That's it. And it's not because I'm not doing anything. I'm facilitating, I'm lifeguarding the pool. She's doing the work. Change happens in an instant, and she was ready for the change. She had kind of primed her system, maybe with these 2 classes, taught her system how to relax and to rest, quiet down the mind, quiet down the body, access the subconscious mind. And on the 3rd week, she said, I'm ready, to do the work.
So once
On
she saw that she was at the crib, then you focus on like, well, where does it feel and what is it? And then she pulls things out of her body
Yeah,
to.
we pull it out, but we also there's something the child needs, and you're
Mm.
allowed to give the child. This is where you can, you know, in that type of work, if the child is wounded, you're allowed to heal the child, and you know what the child needs. I don't specifically maybe know. Maybe after months and months and months and months of talking, maybe I might have a clue what the child needs, but the person, you know what the child needs. It's you. You're the one who is wounded. You were wounded as a child. What do you need instead? And as a fully competent adult, you're allowed to give the child what it needs. And does it need love? Does it need attention? Does it need compassion? Give the child what it needs. Fill the child up with what it didn't get. And now let's move that forward through time all the way up here today so that everything else along the timeline looks different. And the reason that works is because you're kind of manipulating your memories anyway. Whenever you access a memory, you add on to it, according to memory specialists. The only way to keep a memory pure is to never think about it. And so it's sort of like the apps on your phone. Every now and then you have to update your apps. So you can never go back to the original app, especially if you've had that app for years and years. You can never go back to the original app you downloaded because you keep adding on to it. You keep upgrading it. And so memories are like that. You keep adding on to it. And so whatever's happening in your life today, you're kind of impressing upon memory that you may be thinking about something in high school or something happening to your little kid. You keep adding on to it. So it's not a pure memory. And so we don't do anything you're not doing already. So let's use that to our advantage. Let's change how you feel about those old memories. And so let's run the timeline from the time you're a child that now has everything that child needs to live her best life, his best life. And let's run that timeline all the way up to here and change all the dark spots and lighten them up. Yeah,
Amazing.
that's hypnotherapy.
I
Yeah.
love it. Well, this has been so incredibly informational. You have just given us so much information. I didn't want to stop you at any point because everything that came out of your mouth was like eye-opening and so nurturing. And we're out of time, and we didn't get to the past life regression part. So we're gonna have to do a part 2. How do you
Part
feel
two,
about
yeah.
that?
That's perfect. Yeah, let's do it.
Amazing. So on that note, thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna put all of Craig's information on the what do you call it,
Show
description
notes.
underneath,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of his handles, so you can find him and get in touch with him if this is resonating with you. And look for part two, because we're going to continue the conversation with Craig on life past regression. As always, if this is resonating with you, please like, share, leave us a comment, ask a question in the comments or anything, and share with as many people as you feel this podcast and the information here will benefit them or they will like it. On that note, I will see you next time. Bye bye.